Good evening, gamers. Edge of Fate has been a very polarizing expansion so far, to say the least. A lot of people are up in arms about how they hate the changes, and I also hear a lot of the opposite, that the new changes are great and bring a lot to the table. It's rare that a Destiny release isn't at least a little bit more broadly agreed upon, so today I'm going to try and explain what's going on with Edge of Fate, where I believe it has succeeded and where I believe it has failed to meet some expectations. So today we'll be talking about everything. The new gear systems, the new menus, economy balance, UI and menu changes, the campaign, the story, and everything that is pushing Destiny further into the MMO genre. Let's start with the largest system shakeup we have seen in years. It's the most divisive and hotly debated thing about the expansion, the portal. The portal is what you interact with if you're not doing campaign, legacy, or patrol content. It's a relatively simple menu that is designed to accomplish a few things. First, it's meant to give players at any progression level a clear path to either specific drops or a power level improvement with clearly stated rewards for once you complete the activity. Second, it allows players to fine-tune the difficulty of their experience with more challenging modifiers, increasing your score multiplier so you get better rewards. The portal is also designed to let players farm how they want. Through the portal and the different categories, you can queue for solo ops, fireteam ops, harder stuff like exotic missions and pinnacle ops, and then PvP through crucible ops. Through any of those, you can grind to your heart's content until you hit max power. That last bit is another important goal Bungie set for the portal, to uncap the limit on farming, allowing players to farm as much as they want. On paper, the goals for the portal make a lot of sense and directly address issues the game has had for a long time. If you're a new player, you're not going to be confused on how to just get into the action and get some drops. You don't have to decipher which 6 menus to navigate through or learn a ton of proper nouns just to start shooting your guns. This is also great for veteran players who have an extremely quick and clear way to grind without limits now. That is the biggest win for the portal, in my opinion. The ability to just hop on, knock out some activities with friends, or run solo if you feel like it, crank the difficulty up, or just keep it chill. This lets players have easy ways to get familiar with new builds, practice in harder power deficits, and really choose what kind of experience they want to have. It's pretty simple to navigate, so I could definitely see new players getting into this groove pretty quickly. The portal is a massive shakeup for the game's structure, and I definitely call it a win for Destiny. I'm so glad to see such a massive innovation from Bungie. Now, there are just a few problems with it. It does technically function like I've described, but it still has a long way to go and is far from perfect. While the portal is great on paper, it comes with quite a few problems that, while I'm confident they'll be addressed, are very disruptive to the average gameplay session right now. I think they're not the biggest issues, mostly in that Bungie could probably implement them in a way that's pretty easy for them to fix. But anyways, let's just talk about it. So what's wrong with the portal? Just for some context so you know where I'm coming from, I've been grinding pretty hard. I've hit 370 power level. I know some people are already at 450, which is insane, but I still have run tons of master difficulty stuff, a lot of Grandmaster, solo, and pinnacle ops, and I've had plenty of time to run into the biggest issues the portal has. The first and biggest problem I have with the portal is in 2 parts. The first part is that the only way to power level beyond the initial soft cap of 200 is through the portal. That itself isn't necessarily a problem, but it is when you consider the other side of this issue, which is that right now you cannot run raid or dungeons to get higher power gear. Strikes and Crucible are basically the same now. You can still go into those quick play playlists, kind of the same as before really, but as someone who loves raid and dungeon content the most, the portal introduces a surprising step back from the power progression we've had before. Previously, we've had at least 2 raids and 2 dungeons we could run each week to progress our power levels. Those rotated every week and gave players, especially new players, good reasons to get in and learn the harder and honestly better content the game has to offer. With that incentive removed and raids being emphasized absolutely nowhere in the game, I can't even begin to understand why the weekly rotators were removed. The portal is a bit limited on what content you can do. If you're grinding a lot, the available activities can get old pretty quickly since they don't get updated daily. What's in there is great. I love how the modifiers can make solo content genuinely challenging and make me completely change how I approach familiar encounters. But players feel pretty limited on choice, and as expected, people have been running the easiest and fastest missions hundreds of times just for marginal power level improvements. That would definitely be something I've been doing. Through bonus focus drops and daily guaranteed drops changing, the RNG aspect has some mitigation now, which is great, but I feel like I am punished for choosing to run Fireteam Ops quick play when I could run a solo op on an easy mission in a quarter of that time and get the same reward from both activities. I think the solo and pinnacle ops rewards are balanced just fine. Both are very rewarding and give different gear, but they are also far more rewarding than the Fireteam Ops playlist. And I feel like the Classic Strike playlist is the standard Destiny experience that people have come to understand. The Fireteam section as a whole just needs a little something to boost the value. I think a significant increase to materials that drop at the end of Fireteam Ops would give me great reasons to run those repeatedly. While we're bringing up rewards, we can't overlook how confusing the reward system can be. It's great that I can see exactly what reward I have a chance of getting and how to get it, on top of how many standard and bonus drops I'm going to get from it. It's also great that we have the expected reward screen that clearly shows what I can get and what tier of rewards I can expect to see. What's not great is that your rewards are not just tied to your performance and modifiers, but also your power level and how much new gear you have equipped. I get what Bungie is thinking. Obviously, we don't want players to finish up their first easy portal activity and luck into a tier 5 drop. That would skew their perspective on how rewarding activities really should be. But the consequences of this bronze, silver, gold ranking system and tying that to power level is antithetical to Bungie's stated goals. So if you want to grind your power level up or get high tier rewards, that means you're kind of locked into one loadout if you sit down for a long grind session. For the best rewards, you need to be using new gear, and you need to be using your highest power gear too. So obviously you'll be infusing your loadout up as you go. But the more you branch out with your builds and try new stuff, the more materials you need to spend infusing those things up, which means you'll need to be grinding much longer to get more infusement fodder for everything, and that's before you consider that you'll likely want to upgrade any good gear you get along the way, and it's a huge mess, honestly. A mess that's avoided by sticking to just one loadout. But Bungie has stated many times over the years that they want players to be able to choose how they progress and not feel forced into one playstyle or loadout. The multipliers being influenced by new gear definitely goes against that and other additions Edge of Fate brings to the build crafting landscape, which otherwise have vastly broadened player choice and agency to stronger and more varied loadouts. And the cherry on top, the lower your power level, the less upgrade materials you're going to get from completing activities. I love the idea that experienced players and hardcore grinders get a lot more materials, but I think Bungie could look at the upgrade material economy at lower levels, make it much cheaper to upgrade or infuse low power stuff, maybe even make gear under 200 power nearly free to upgrade, only requiring Glimmer. That is something I do love about Edge of Fate though. Infusement and upgrades have never been cheaper. But early on, your materials will run dry if you don't already have stockpiles or if you just want to upgrade things a lot. So without making it cheaper for new players, they'll end up not wanting to upgrade anything until they have tier 3 or higher gear, which means they'll be less powerful until they have grinded enough to have the materials to upgrade the stuff they're going to immediately replace at that point. Another thing I would like to see is, obviously, featured dungeons and raids being looped back into the portal. With Fireteam Finder matchmaking a click away, that should be an easy win. But that leads me to yet another issue with the portal, which is that matchmaking through the portal is very limited, with no way to indicate to a potential Fireteam Finder lobby what custom modifiers you want. Obviously, you could use text and voice chat, but that still is going to waste a lot of time for players when the Fireteam Finder user experience isn't as smooth or refined as it really should be. All of these issues together means that the best way to grind for gear is going to be, for most people, solo ops, where you never change up your loadout and you run the shortest and easy activity over and over until you can comfortably do the same on a higher difficulty tier. While solo ops are fun, if you want to do almost anything else, you're not going to be farming very efficiently and will feel like your progression is notably slower compared to those who choose to grind in the mathematically preferred methods. One thing that I haven't explained yet that comes with its own issue is that 200 power is the hard cap for any piece of gear, but further powerful drops are going to be higher only for the season. I actually like the idea of the highest tier drops with rare tier 5 exclusive cosmetics being the new, you had to be there kind of trophies. But the process of getting to where you can acquire them is a grueling grind that most players won't ever complete simply because it isn't very fun. The grind to get your power up so that the exact same grind is actually rewarding good loot doesn't leave me feeling great, even if the progression is uncapped and I can grind as much as I want. As a starting point, the portal is a fantastic addition to Destiny. It needs some work, but as with all MMOs, major system shakeups are not easy to balance and plan everything around perfectly before launch, especially with Destiny's existing gear and activity systems. This will absolutely see iteration and improvement, and I wouldn't be surprised if in a month we already have some solutions laid out by Bungie to all of these big issues. I am especially excited for more updates since the portal allows for a lot of new ways Bungie could make use of their sandbox. They could test out fun ways to use the different playlists and modifiers they've added for themselves. Maybe for some event, all activities in a certain playlist have a challenging modifier that increases your rewards by engaging with it, or maybe there could be a big material drop incentive to run a certain featured dungeon. Maybe they could set a speedrun timer modifier that makes the time bonus a lot more significant, but a lot harder to meet. And, I wrote this script and that section there before the Solstice event, the event based around me, came out, and the modifiers they added are so fun. They're thematic, they are perfect for the event, and they actually help you with the grind, because instead of lowering your multiplier, even though they're beneficial, they actually raise it, so you're getting better loot for interacting with the event, and that is exactly what I put in the script here. We're gonna move on. Those are just some super basic ideas off the top of my head, and I am by no means as creative as the talent behind Destiny is. We're already seeing some awesome additions like Arms Day with special crazy mods for certain weapon types and exclusive weapons. Bungie could do a lot. Now, I'm only power level 370, roughly. I know that's pretty high, all things considered, but I've heard others who have been able to grind even more than I have say that the progression nearing and after 400, it slows down dramatically. I don't really see an issue with that personally, since at that point there's really not much of a reason to grind further beyond just, get your tier 5 gear, find the armor pieces with the right stats you want. But I could also see it being an issue if in Renegades that pace stays the same while the cap increases. We can't accurately speculate that far ahead, so we'll just have to see when things get here. I'm very excited to see where the portal goes in the future, even if it's a bit rocky right now. I love the idea and want to see Bungie work on it to make it great. I'm enjoying the portal a lot, honestly. I'm enjoying being able to control my loot grind so precisely. I'm loving that every single time I run anything, I get an upgrade even if it's small, and I love how progressing feels really rewarding now since my drops only keep getting better. If Bungie continues to innovate and add on to the portal, I'll definitely feel even better about it. And that was a lot of talk about the portal. So let's move on. What else did Bungie add? Yeah, they reworked the entire gear system. That's kind of neat. So we have gear tiers in Destiny now. A normal drop is going to be tier 1. Tier 5s are really, really rare, and for some weapons and armor, such as the Raid, tier 5s aren't even available yet. You need to get your power up really high past 400 to start seeing tier 5s consistently. For armor, the higher the tier, the higher the potential stat total. For weapons, as tiers increase, the weapon gets enhanced, but you can no longer pay to upgrade these new weapons like you could before. So at tier 5, weapons have enhanced perks, enhanced barrels, magazines, and origin traits. Endgame grinders right now are generally going to be rocking tier 3s and 4s with maybe a lucky tier 5 somewhere in there, unless they're at the point where, again, they're past 400 and they're going to start getting a lot of tier 5s. But at tier 3, your gear is roughly as good as the old gear was in terms of enhancement, stat totals, and so on. This means that if you grind to get a higher power level or do certain triumphs or quests for a certain activity, your best gear is going to be on average a lot better than what we had access to before Edge of Fate. And as a general rule, your gear is just going to be stronger across the board than ever before. On top of that, Bungie dramatically buffed the reward for high stat investments. So if you really want your grenades or your super to recharge fast and do a lot of damage, you're going to feel like you're almost breaking the game at times with how strong you can get. Those changes and a lot of more technical stuff like buffs to ability region scaling and changes to the interactions between abilities and the buffs you can get, they've done a lot for build diversity. You can really specialize how you want to build your character. Before now, it was all too often that someone would ask me how to make a cool build or use this exotic they had an idea for. And, I'd have those ideas too, but half the time you really couldn't use it because there just wasn't enough power behind your investment into that kind of a build that you might be interested in. But with Edge of Fate, that is really no longer the case. If you invest heavily into something, you're going to get a really large return, and that has done so much good for the build crafting landscape. The portal does complicate the acquisition of the new gear tiers, higher tier 4, tier 5, and so on. But if you're already grinding for that, you're not going to have any trouble getting extremely potent drops, so you're going to be going absolutely crazy off the rails once you have all tier 5s. But the good news is even at just tier 3 gear, which I feel like the average player is going to find on all of their pieces pretty quick, you're still going to be much stronger than you were before Edge of Fate. So this is really just a massive build crafting win for every type of player. That is not to be overlooked. Another fantastic change they added was how you can upgrade your armor. Previously, you could pay increasingly expensive material costs to level up armor, and that would give it bonus stats as well as allow you to slot more mods. Now, that system has been cut down from 10 improvement levels to a max of 5, with overall significantly cheaper costs that make the investment more rewarding. Previously, if you fully masterworked a piece of armor, it would give you +2 to all of the stats, which was just kind of awkward and not always beneficial, but you still needed to pay for that upgrade because it was the only way to get all of your armor mod slots. Now, every armor piece in the game has all 10 mod slots available with no investment. Also, fully upgrading your armor now gives you +5 in the 3 stats that didn't have any points on that piece of gear. And to really make the quality of life hit the mark, Bungie made it so the now reworked stat Resilience has been converted to health, with the previous maximum benefit from Resilience being baseline for all characters. This removes a nearly required stat and turns it into another thing you could choose to invest into without removing previous functionality. For weapons, the changes are less drastic but still very impactful. At higher tiers, you'll be getting double or triple perks much more commonly, and it's a lot more likely because of that to get the role you want than ever before. And then you'll also likely have some flexibility to swap perks on top of that. I am a huge fan of the new gear system, and I think it's the best thing Bungie has ever done to weapons and armor. I understand a lot of people aren't happy with the acquisition of high tier loot being tied to power level, and I mentioned that, I do get it. But on the other hand, I am very glad that hardcore players or anyone investing time into the game is going to be rewarded consistently as they progress. Once the acquisition is tuned a bit better, this will definitely be the best update we've ever seen to our gear, and it's really not close. The increase in build potency, diversity, potential, along with armor actually mattering again, and high-tier weapons having drastically mitigated RNG, this new system is doing some extremely heavy lifting, and I am thrilled that Bungie brought gear tiers into the game. All this talk about gear systems, and I forgot to mention the actual gear itself. In recent times, Bungie has been giving us very unique weapons that are extremely strong pieces you need to build around. I love that exotic and legendary weapons aren't just good like they used to be. Instead, modern guns are specialized tools that tend to trade off damage for utility in some capacity, and the less utility something has, the better it is at clearing ads or doing raw damage. Hats off to Bungie for making me want auto-loading holster on a primary. Never thought I'd see the day I could say that, but the new raid weapons have a sick origin trait that's basically mini rampage, a damage stacking bonus, but the timer on it pauses when you put the gun away, making auto-loading holster extremely valuable on an entire ammo type I had written that perk off of ever being on. New weapon archetypes are coming out swinging with a heavy crossbow that lets you pick up your bolts wherever they land, a rocket pulse rifle that does entirely too much damage, and a shotgun hand cannon. A primary shotgun hand cannon. This gets shotgun perks like Threat Remover or 1-2 Punch or Barrel Constrictor. These new weapon types, along with other creative ideas like giving Finality's Augur bait and switch, Icebreaker is extremely fun and effective, the disc-shaped SMG Barrow Dyad doing its weird thing but still very strong, Graviton Spike calling lightning down on crits, support frames in general, rocket sidearms. The ideas for new frames and exotics are really progressing in a way that makes me feel confident that the Bungie weapons team still has a lot of gas in the tank, even after all these years of designing and developing the distinctly Destiny fusion of satisfying, realistic, and space magic weaponry. That was really hard to say. The weapons team is killing it, and I don't think they get enough appreciation. Their work is so consistently good that it becomes somewhat of a foregone conclusion like, well, of course the guns look, feel, and synergize well with the sandbox. That's just what guns in Destiny do. While it's true, it doesn't emphasize that the gunplay is second to none. I love shooters, and while there are a ton out there that I think are fantastic in their own right, no other dev team has made combat loops that are so consistently satisfying to me over a vast breadth of sandbox options. The level of polish the weapons teams gives our gear is not something you see in any shooter I'm aware of, so I just wanted to mention that real quick. Let's not take Bungie's talented devs for granted. So we went over the portal, armor, guns, stats, loot, what else? Oh yeah, an entire planet with its own campaign and characters. That could be good to talk about now. Kepler is the new destination where the Edge of Fate campaign happens. We're going to just skim over story stuff here to avoid spoilers, but I loved Orin, Lodi, and Ikora, our main characters this time around, and I found their voice acting performances to be fantastic. I actually want to mention that real quick. Before Edge of Fate launched, there was a voice acting strike going on, and due to that, Mara Juno, I believe I'm saying that right, I hope so, was not available to voice Ikora like she usually would. Bungie is re-recording her lines now that the strike has ended, but on launch, Ikora was voiced by Deborah Wilson, who we know as the voice of Savathun. Anyone who has heard Ikora enough over the years will easily be able to tell that the vibe and tone from Ikora is really not the same. I'm here to say, though, that I loved Deborah's performance and was very happy with not only the performance but also the direction. It's clear that the goals of the acting and direction were not to replicate or impersonate Zavala when Keith David had to take over the role, and it seems the same philosophy was applied here. I love how angry Deborah Wilson makes Ikora sound, especially for the expansion where, no spoilers, but Ikora has very good reasons to be angry here, and she really sells it. In Edge of Fate, Ikora is as strong a personality as ever, but regardless of the voice acting you get to experience, you'll be getting a portrayal that is true to her character and comes with the clean and professional delivery you would expect from a main character. Huge shoutouts to the rest of the voice talent as well. I love Orin's voice, and Lodi is perfectly casted and directed as to really stick out in the Destiny universe, which, as you'll learn, is kind of the point. Lodi is also extremely likable, at least I thought so. He's my new favorite character, and I'm very happy that he has taken on a major role in the overall story to integrate him firmly in the future roots of Destiny. The story itself is somewhat in two parts, with a huge overall story arc getting started, as this is the beginning of the next era of Destiny, alongside a smaller story that still services the plot and characters well enough to be compelling the whole time. I can't say that the smaller plot with the Archon was my favorite, because they kind of felt like a Saturday morning cartoon villain sometimes with how comically ignorant their plans were, but it wasn't jarring or annoying, it was still fun. And if that was the main plot though, I would honestly be pretty disappointed, but because it serves to hook into the main overarching story involving the Nine and what we have to do after the expansion, I am overall reflecting on the story very positively. Each of the characters were easily likable, and there were no Marvel quip moments to cringe at, instead replaced by actually realistic jokes and conversations between characters that felt really natural and flowed well. I never felt like anyone was about to turn and wink at the camera, which is to say Cayde 6 does not come back again. There were a few hard-hitting emotional moments that, while well written, would not land nearly as well if the voice acting wasn't on point. The story was great all around, and I think you should experience it yourself, so we're just going to leave the story discussion at that. It's very enjoyable, especially for Destiny. Go play it. As for Kepler and the campaign itself, while I don't think it's the best campaign of all time, after playing through on Legend twice, I do really like it a lot. I love the new mechanics as they pertain to combat, and the big boss arenas feel decently challenging in terms of line of sight, a lack of cover, and enemy placement. That said, the Legend campaign was notably easier than the other expansions before it. I think that's kind of a minor issue due to the introduction of the optional difficulties that feel really well tuned for a 3-person fire team to face a good challenge. So even if it wasn't the hardest thing in the world, the combat encounters on Legend felt well designed and very fun to engage with. I never felt annoyed or frustrated during a big fight, which is great. I played a very mobile and high APM build for the first time I went through, the Behemoth Titan build I put out previously, and it was a great time. Maybe it would have been even easier if I was on Skullford or Prismatic or something else extremely strong like that, but I felt the difficulty was fine for a strong build, especially considering how there will likely be a lot of new players who are familiar with shooters but not Destiny builds. This Legend campaign is very doable if you have FPS skills and no Destiny skills. That said, my biggest critique of the campaign is how the Kepler abilities, Matter Spark and Matter Morph, are looped into the puzzle solving, and I say puzzle solving in quotes here. The only times I ever felt stuck on Kepler weren't because I needed to solve a complex puzzle or I didn't quite understand a mechanic. I only ever felt stuck when I couldn't find the thing. The hole in the corner to Matter Spark into, the slightly glowing panel on the ceiling around a corner that you need to move with Matter Morph, or the charging station you need to find to zap with Matter Spark. That stuff was just not fun. I didn't feel like it was a challenge. I didn't enjoy much of the find the thing you interact with, and because you already know what to do once you find it, you'll just go type of puzzles, if you could even call them puzzles. I think the campaign being marked as Metroidvania inspired is a little bit of a stretch. Metroidvanias usually make you take your time to explore and come back later, but due to the linear nature of an MMO campaign like this, and the abysmally low intelligence and skill floor of the average Destiny player, they really weren't able to implement actual puzzles, and just off of their recent track record, we know Bungie can absolutely make some damn good puzzles. In this instance though, I felt that the Kepler abilities should have been used in combat puzzles much more than trying to shoehorn them into any exploration in a format that doesn't really allow for too much mold breaking. We had a combat puzzle that I liked at the last boss where you had to charge Matter Spark and jump into a launcher to make the enemies vulnerable, but that should have been a mechanic we saw very close to the beginning, not the very end of the campaign. And after the campaign, you get upgrades to your abilities, which is when Matter Spark goes off the rails and becomes extremely overpowered. When you unlock all of the upgrades by doing the campaign missions on harder difficulties, Matter Spark heals you when you go into it, it gives you Amplified when you exit, and it's something you can apply and activate infinitely since it just replaces your vehicle on Kepler. It also lets you jump out of Matter Spark mid-air to change and add momentum however you want, on top of having a built-in super jump, so it's busted for platforming too. There have been a lot of complaints about ball mode, and I know the implementation of the abilities in the campaign could use a lot of work, but anyone who doesn't like Matter Spark after the campaign must not know how to use it properly, because wow, it's good, and it flows perfectly in the average combat loop once you start using it properly. Now, Kepler has no shortage of visually striking zones, and I love the way Bungie incorporates familiar building blocks to mesh them with the overgrown dark matter stuff. While the design does reuse different elements from previous planets and activities, those are used well alongside new assets to make the destination have its own visual style. As always, the skyboxes are colorful and eye-catching, the environments are very distinct, and in general, I love the use of color in this destination. Kepler is also the first time we've seen world tiers, which, as you can guess, make your patrol or campaign gameplay a lot harder for better rewards. Mythic is the hardest tier, and while a lot of people find the enemies too tanky, I definitely have enjoyed my time running multiple Mythic missions with whoever needs it. These missions will force a solid team to work together and more deeply engage with the sandbox to succeed. While the enemies are a lot tankier, our builds also have gotten much stronger, and with support roles more viable than ever now, there's definitely no shortage of ways to approach these missions. I never felt like I had to plink away with an infinite ammo weapon for an hour, which is great because I wasn't really a fan of D1. After the campaign, you unlock Civ? I don't know, we're gonna call it Steve. Steve is a limited time mission in that it's only up for a period of time before it goes away for a bit, kind of like a public event, but it's something you queue into and has longer time intervals between. I think it's up for 2 hours and gone for 1, something like that. I've never paid attention to it because every time I've wanted to run it, the countdown until it starts hasn't been very long, and there's plenty to do on Kepler or elsewhere to get meaningful progress while I wait. The rewards you get from Steve are very good, with a high chance of the new exotic armor dropping on a round completion, and otherwise you get higher tier loot that you can focus at the Kepler vendor, so you're very likely to get what you want. Overall, I thought Kepler was great. It fits well in the Destiny universe and activity sandbox. I hope to see the next zone and Renegades take notes from the big wins here, and learn from the issues involving how the destination-specific abilities were implemented in the campaign. Lastly, I want to talk really quick about the raid. I don't think I need to fully review it because I think you should experience it yourself for the first time, but I think it's great. It's really fun. It's not hard at all if you can walk and chew gum at the same time. The loot is incredibly cool and unique. The raid is just boss after boss, which is a fun change of pace. You can choose which encounters you do in whatever order, and the mechanics are enjoyable to execute, even if they're a little bit simple sometimes. I think Desert Perpetual is yet another fantastic piece of endgame content for Destiny, and you should be running it. Let's get a quick recap of everything we've talked about so far. The portal is a great starting point, but needs a lot of adjustment to make players want to engage with it rather than feeling forced into it. I think the portal has a great future ahead of it though. The portal leveling system is a bit confusing at times, and leveling optimally means you're doing activities on repeat that aren't particularly challenging or engaging once you've done it a few times, but this is again mostly stemming from the portal. Loot system changes are a massive win, making our builds more powerful than ever while allowing for more build variety in what's actually viable for harder content. These loot changes also heavily mitigate RNG while not making lower tier gear feel completely useless until you're ready to fully replace pieces. New weapons feel great and make the sandbox more engaging and add a ton of synergies on top of what we've already had. The campaign is fun with well-designed combat encounters, a fantastic story, lovable characters, expectedly top-notch voice acting, and thoughtfully implemented visuals throughout. It suffers from some issues with puzzle design between encounters not actually being real puzzles, and the Metroidvania exploration really doesn't hit the mark. I felt that the lackluster exploration aspect did hold the combat encounters back a bit during the campaign, though it was still an overall enjoyable experience, even if it's a little on the easy side. And then of course the raid is really enjoyable, with fun and engaging mechanics, great loot, awesome spectacle factor, and some really cool lore. Instead of a 1 through 10 rating or whatever, I'm going to compare Edge of Fate to other Destiny expansions. While it doesn't have as expansive of a content drop as Forsaken, they had an entire destination as a post-campaign secret. That was pretty awesome. However, I would say the changes brought to the game are much more impactful to the loot, combat, and build crafting systems, which, as you should know, are the biggest things I value in an expansion. So for that reason, I'm going to put Edge of Fate on par with Forsaken. Though I did appreciate what Final Shape did for the game with the introduction of Prismatic and opening the door for Edge of Fate's build crafting ramp up, and as an overall package I do think Final Shape was superior. But just because I don't think the Edge of Fate is the best expansion ever, doesn't mean that it's anything less than awesome. Final Shape was fantastic and universally praised, all while wrapping up a decade-long story. You simply can't top that while laying the groundwork for literally everything for the next handful of years in an MMO. Edge of Fate accomplishes what it sought out to do, which is to expand the Destiny universe and story, modernize the menus, upgrade armor stats and build crafting to be stronger, simpler, more accessible, and still increase the depth of the sandbox. That is a massively underappreciated balancing act that I'm impressed Bungie was able to nail the most important fundamentals of. I highly recommend Edge of Fate to anyone who loves Destiny 2, and to anyone looking for a new MMO home in a highly engaging ability shooter format. My only word of caution for new players is that you really should get a friend or community to help answer the thousands of questions you're going to have. So of course, you're welcome to join our community here and ask away. If you've made it this far in the video, thank you, but it's not over. I have more to say if you could believe it. Firstly, I just want to tie up some loose ends that didn't easily fit into the other parts of the script. Let's talk about some of the bugs and issues that are popping up these days. All the Bungie hate watchers out there are gonna love this part. Right now, there are quite a lot of bugs and unintended issues with the expansion, so let's just make a list, shall we? There's the sprint bug, where sometimes if you die, you can only move at walking speed. No idea what causes that. However, that was patched literally yesterday as I record this, so, that's nice, but geez, why did that happen? Rally flags in raids just stop working sometimes, not giving you back ability energy, and sometimes not even ammo. Gotta go to orbit and back if that happens. I haven't run into this one myself, but many people are saying that sometimes their guns just shoot slower, I guess? The RPM drops dramatically for no reason at all. Again, I've never seen it myself, but I've heard multiple reports of this online from friends, but yeah, that's fun, huh? What else? Oh yeah, when Arms Day launched, the event title was not possible to get without paying money. I'm choosing to believe that was an accident because Bungie put out a pretty quick fix, but it's still not a great feeling, Some people can't focus exotics they already have, I guess. No idea what causes that. Doesn't affect me, but that still really sucks. Kind of a big oversight, but prismatic class items not counting as new gear means they can't be brought into some activities that are new gear only, which means a lot of the strongest prismatic builds aren't as potent and some won't work without the class item. Personally, I actually like that one. Prismatic is still too good in my opinion, but I don't really think it should be restricted in an artificial way like that. I'd rather Bungie hit them with another round of nerfs across the board, but whatever, moving on. The events such as Arms Week and Solstice, the best event by the way, not biased, will drop gear that's tiered to your power level still. You have to get to certain power levels, which isn't explained in the game by the way, to be able to earn up to, I believe, a max of tier 3 loot off of a random event drop. At least that's how it was on Arms Day. I know they did buff that for Solstice, again, the best event ever.
But I get that this system is at least consistent with the rest of the game's reward structure, but for limited time events, that really sucks, and I hope that the change they made to Solstice, where the gear tiers are +1 or +2 on a rare drop, those, I really need that to stay, Bungie. That makes the event go from really awful feeling at first, like Arms Day did before they fixed it, into now they were skeptical of Solstice, but now everybody loves it because it's just raining loot, good loot, worthwhile, fun cosmetics. It's a great event. So I hope they learned from Arms Day and continue this trend. But back to bugs. We get crashes if you play for more than 5 hours on PC. Dead Messenger was a one-shot kill in PvP, so that had to be disabled during trials. On launch, if you had a high FOV and dared to move the camera at all while using a Matterspark node, you would be given a seizure as your camera spun at Mach 4. So that was a fun surprise mechanic to work around. There were a good handful more bugs, but the point is that there were quite a few at launch that haven't all been resolved yet, and a lot of oversights or mistakes or decisions that just made the launch feel kind of messy. Thankfully, the actual launch of the game went very well. They turned on the servers and I was in queue for 8 minutes, then everything was smooth sailing from there. I didn't get kicked. So I'm glad they've actually ironed out the server issues. We've seen, previous launches. I think maybe it was Beyond Light. That was the worst one that had hour-long queues for so many people. It was bad. Clearly, there were some issues, but overall, the players have run into a lot of inconveniences in the first few weeks, and, that is bad, but there's an even bigger issue with Destiny that we haven't talked about yet. If you know me, you probably know what I'm going to bring up here. The Destiny community is... I should choose my words carefully here. When I refer to the Destiny community, I'm referring to the excessively loud whiners everywhere on the internet who have nothing better to do than get upset or pretend to be upset about Destiny. It's just so exhausting. I see it and I feel exhausted. Thank God I'm not trying to have a discussion with those people. So to address that, I'm going to say something that I think will really help you out if you're annoyed by those miserable people too. And that is... nothing. I'm actually not going to talk about it anymore. I'm loving Destiny now as much as ever, and as you now know, I do have concerns and criticisms of the expansion and some choices that were made, but I'm not so short-sighted that I can't see the big picture and what I value in a long-term hobby like this. Destiny is fun to play every time I log on. Edge of Fate brought a lot of new content and ways to play that I'm enjoying every day. Weapons feel better than ever, the new cosmetics are so cool, there's so much to do and a lot of room for skill expression involved in improving, build crafting, and just generally experiencing everything Bungie has on the table for us right now. There's so much depth everywhere you look. I love Destiny. It's my game, Edge of Fate is here in full swing now, and I am very optimistic looking forward towards Renegades. Nobody knows what's next for Destiny, but I can confirm that I will be there, and I hope you will be too. Thanks for watching, and thank you, Bungie, for a great experience, but I've got to get back to farming solo ops. Caldera's not going to grind itself. Have a good one, gamers.